Welcome, everyone. Welcome. And it looks like it's 6:34, so in my world, you're not really late until 10-15 minutes after the appointed hour, but again, because we do have an audience, a remote audience, hopefully tuning in from all around the state, we want to try and start on time so that they're not left waiting. And I'll ask our speakers to sit. Rich, Logan, Marilyn, and Dana. I'll be introducing each of them in a moment. And once again, is the sound good for everyone? I also want to make sure for our technicians with the live stream that everything's good to go. And let me see. Okay. Once again, if everyone can just please make sure that your cell phones are turned down, voices are turned down. We do want to keep everything as quiet as possible for our remote audience. So with no further ado, I want to welcome everyone to Let My Vote Count, the risks of voting in Georgia and what you can do. Thank you. And again, we're here at Manuel's Tavern in Atlanta, and we do have people from all over Georgia tuning in, so welcome everyone. My name is Caroline Stover. I am a DeKalb County voter. I'm one of the organizers of tonight's program. The other sponsors, the co-sponsors of the event are Georgia Alliance for Social Justice and Georgia Votes Paper. So, some brief remarks before we get started. First, we're going to see a video, but I just wanted to kind of introduce you to our talk for tonight. I don't know if a lot of you are like me. I've been paying a lot of attention to the elections coming up in November. Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, or anything in between, it is what I think very important for most of us to know that we can exercise our basic constitutional right to vote in our state. So what is that process? We're all researching candidates. We're making our choices. Maybe some of us are donating money to our candidates. Maybe some of us are deciding we're going to volunteer and go door to door from now until Election Day. And that's great. The problem is when we actually go to the polls. Here in Georgia, many of us are feeling that when we cast our votes in our state, it's a joke. And I am purposely using those terms because this is not something that happened overnight. Here we are, 3 months before an important election, living with the reality that once again, Georgia voters might be going to the polls and not know if your vote actually counts. So I think all of us are aware by now. There's been a lot in the news, almost every day it seems like, Lately, if you also decide to look into it more deeply, I think you find that it's actually been going on for years. And we do have a panel who has been actually involved in this for a long time. We have two computer science, we have a computer science expert, a cybersecurity expert, we have voting advocates, and then we'll take your questions. I think you'll be very interested in not only learning about how we got here as a state, the state of Georgia. How did we get to this place where we feel insecure and unconfident about going to the polls? How did we get here? And most importantly, what is the solution? I'll just conclude by saying, again, I don't think I'm alone in saying enough is enough. And we simply can't wait any longer for example, our Secretary of State, who is specifically tasked with voter security. That is his job. We can't wait any longer for him to emerge from under the lawsuits and investigations and scandals and find a solution for us. We also can't wait for our lawmakers, our legislators. This year's legislative session closed without a solution. Are we going to have to wait till 2019? How is that going to help us in November? I, for one, will not accept that 2020 is the goal. We need and we can find a solution for November. And again, that's why we're here. We now are saying enough is enough. Georgia voters demand and deserve what the experts are saying, that Georgia is one of very few states left in the country that has outdated voting machines with serious security problems. Experts are telling our officials, our election officials, that yes, they should be worried that their constituents' votes are not secure. So, let me turn the page. Wow, that was hard. So that's why we're here tonight. There is a solution, and every one of us can make sure it happens. So that's the good news. With us tonight to walk us through this is Mr. Richard DeMillo, Georgia Distinguished Professor of Computing and Professor of Management at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Logan Lamb, cybersecurity expert who first alerted state officials to vulnerabilities he discovered in the Kennesaw State University voting system in 2016. Marilyn Marks, Director of Voter Advocacy Group, Coalition for Good Governance, and Dana Bowers, organizer at Georgia Votes Paper. We will hear presentations, as I said, from each of our speakers, and then take questions from the Manuel's audience and from the audience on the live feed. But first we're going to play a short video. I hope that everyone has a view from all the TVs in the room. And the video shows how easily Georgia's quote-unquote dangerous obsolete, to use the words of the computer scientist in the video, how those dangerous obsolete voting machines can be hacked.
All cybersecurity experts have been given electronic voting machines and people agree. These machines have got to know. To show you why, I'm running a mock election using the same dangerous, obsolete machine that's still in use today. Our election will find out whether Michigan students prefer their own university or our arch rival, Ohio State.
After the chaos of the 2000 election, we were promised a month.
Oh no.
It's been a hack, Ben.
And dependable way to vote. I'm here to tell you that the electronic voting machines Americans got to solve the problem of voting integrity, they turned out to be an awful idea.
One vote for McCain.
That's because people like me can hack them. all too easily. I'm a computer scientist who has hacked a lot of electronic voting machines. I even turned one machine into a video game console. Imagine what the Russians and North Koreans can do. I've even gone to Congress to raise the alarm. Our highly computerized election infrastructure is vulnerable to sabotage and even to cyber attacks that could change votes. This is the same electronic voting machine used in Georgia, in parts of Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, and even in swing states like Virginia, Florida, and Pennsylvania. Millions of Americans voted on paperless electronic voting machines in the 2016 election.
Who are you going to vote for?
100% Michigan.
100% Michigan.
Obviously Michigan.
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 But here's a little secret between you and me. I've already hacked these worthless machines. Step 1. Buy a voting machine on eBay. Or, if you're the North Koreans, hack the manufacturer and steal their software code. Step 2. Write a virus. Step 3. Email your virus to every election official responsible for programming the voting machines with new ballots. Many of these officials are easy to find online. Step 4. Sip coffee and wait. Step 5. Hijack the ballot programming and let the election officials copy your invisible malicious code onto the voting machines. Step 6. Watch your code silently steal votes.
All right, here are the results from the electronic voting machines. Ohio State wins 131 to 108.
There's a good reason we computer scientists are paranoid. It's a golden age for hackers.
The computer virus that destroyed Iranian nuclear equipment.
This is one of the largest data breaches in history.
More than 1 billion of its accounts were hacked.
What chance do the people running your local elections really have against Russia or North Korea?
Okay, everyone. I hacked the voting machines. I do have the real results because we also counted on paper. Michigan wins!
Michigan won in a landslide. And I can say this confidently because I have the real results from the safest and simplest solution, paper ballots.
We need to take a hard look at the equipment that actually records and reports votes.
Even though the Senate Intelligence Committee is finally showing some understanding of the problem, it's not enough. All states in this country, the people ultimately responsible for how we vote, must act too. In a real election, an official could quickly scan these paper ballots and shortly after have a human verify the results. Paper plus audits. All elections should be run this way. But if you don't want to believe me, or every single expert in cybersecurity who's thought this through, then take it from this guy.
It's old-fashioned, but it's always good to have a paper backup system of voting. It's called paper.
Okay, that's our video introduction, and I am just going to go right into our speakers. Rich, we'll start with you, and then go to Logan, Marilyn, Dana, and then take questions from the audience.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn, thanks for organizing this tonight. Thanks to the sponsors for inviting us. Thanks to all of you. So I want to take just a few minutes and play the professor and give you some definitions. This is a highly technical area, and I think people kind of get lost in the technical jargon. And what I want to do is to convince you in 5 minutes or so that you don't have to have much more than common sense to understand what's going on with our election system and the threat to it. So the first thing to understand is that people who talk in Georgia about voting machines are handing you a lot of hooey. We don't have voting machines in Georgia, we have voting computers. We have a whole system of voting computers. You can see some of them on the screen here. They're laptops, they're tablets, they're servers sitting in racks, they're machines that you vote on by touching a screen on election day. And those voting computers, like every other computer in the world, are subject to hacking by people who either have a malicious intent or they want to extract something from you. The discussion of cybersecurity of voting computers should always start with a threat. And in our case, we know a lot today about the threat that's facing election systems. Federal agencies that track what are called advanced persistent threats publish bulletins, like this one published by the Department of Homeland Security. And even though you can't read what's under the redacted portion of this document, it's scary enough to read the material that you can see. What it says is that there are people out there who have not only said that they're going to hack into our systems, they've tried to hack into our systems. Okay. 3 kinds of threats to think about. Why are these things called advanced persistent threats? They're advanced because they're sophisticated, and in the case of the Russians, who are the ones that we're concerned about at the moment, advanced means that they are using everything from the kind of spycraft that you see talked about in the Jean Le Carré novel to the stuff that Alex Halderman did in the video a few minutes ago. All of that comes under the definition of threats to Georgia's election system. We talk a lot in election security about the security of individual components. In fact, if you read the assurances from the Secretary of State's office, they will tell you till the cows come home that every component of the system is certified by someone. It's certified to be secure. I just want to make the point that in the security business, you talk about not component security, but what's called end-to-end security. You want to make sure that when you start to vote, that your vote gets counted properly, and if that happens to be on a system in which some components are certified, some components are not certified, so be it. This is the picture you should always have in your mind. It's a really, really good padlock on a system that's not secure. This is something in the security business you call steel doors and paper walls. So we're prone, when we think about Georgia's election system, to concentrate on the steel doors because that makes us feel good. It's the paper walls that matter. Fact of the matter is that in Georgia, like most states in the U.S., we use really, really crappy padlocks. The padlock that we use is this one right here on the left. Don't be fooled by the packaging. It's essentially the handheld computer that you see at the right, which dates from the year 2001. So this is in the very early days of cybersecurity. None of these machines have any of the capabilities that you would associate with even a relatively modern desktop computer. These are kind of basic machines that are open to anyone to examine and to hack into. If you didn't catch it from Alex's talk, something to keep in mind is that since the year 2002, there have been dozens, maybe hundreds, of attempts to hack into voting machines just like the ones in Georgia. There has never been, to my knowledge, an unsuccessful attempt to hack into a voting machine. Oh my God. Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. There have been laboratory studies, there have been demonstrations for congressional committees. There was at the annual summer conference of hackers in Las Vegas last summer a hacking village, a ballroom filled with every kind of voting computer that you can imagine. People walked in the door, and within 20 minutes they had started to hack into voting machines like ours. Within 2 hours, every machine had been hacked into and compromised. What we're told is that our voting system is secure. And what we're told is that there are things, magical things about how Georgia's election system works that should give us a lot of comfort that we're not going to be vulnerable. We're told that our voting systems are air-gapped, for example. We're told that they're not connected to the internet. And in the rare instances where our systems are connected to the internet, the kinds of attacks that you saw in Alex's video are simply not realistic. Or if they're realistic, then the only attacks that we're worried about require physical access to voting machines. So the point is that every time you hear one of these assurances, you should have a picture like this in mind. What is an air-gapped system? It's a system that doesn't connect physically 100% of the time to any external network. It's an air-gapped network. There are entire websites that you can go to that will teach you how to hack into an air-gapped system. It's a specialty in cybersecurity to hack into air-gapped systems. Even if you say, well, so air gapping isn't the end all and be all, removable media means that you would have to get access to the removable media in order to hack into the system, like this. This is removable media. This is all they're talking about when they talk about hacking into.
Or something like this.
Yeah, so we've got all of these. These are really hard to come by. I have stacks of them in my laboratory. This was the attack that the Iranians fell prey to with the Stuxnet virus. Transferring malware from machine to machine by inserting and removing removable media. It's like addicts sharing needles in an alley. You transmit a virus by moving from machine to machine. And we're told that the physical control of the systems is impeccable. It's easy to walk around Atlanta on election day and find stacks of unprotected voting machines. We saw Alex Halderman's demo. He was at Georgia Tech in April and demonstrated an air-gapped system attack. An attack that gets around all the supposed safeguards that we're told make Georgia's system secure. And then erases itself. So you can't tell that anything has been done. So what's an attack look like? It looks like the robbers in Home Alone. People drive by neighborhoods and they case the joint. They look for likely targets. They case the joint. They look for vulnerable points of entry and they attack the weakest point. Now we were told up until 3 months ago that Georgia was not the subject of these kinds of drive-by surveillances. But we saw in Bob Mueller's indictment 2 weeks ago a specific mention of counties in Georgia where someone unknown, some bad actor, cased the joint. And they did it with bad intent. So is this all just scare tactics? Are all these things realistic? I think one of the things that we kind of failed to get in this discussion is the scale of activities that are taking place. So this is an example of what's called an attack map. This is a global attack map that I captured from last November, I believe, November 2017, and it picks up just before the elections in November 2017. And I'm just going to let it run. I think if you mouse over it, it'll start running. Okay, so is it going? Oh no, QuickTime's not available. Okay, so I will tell you what's in this video. So starting about noon on October 31st, 2017, the people that track malware traffic around the world started to see packets flow between countries. And these particular attacks probably came from North Korea. We don't know for sure because this information isn't made public. But by the time you get to November 1st, all of those lines that you see, which represent denial of service attacks around the world, have essentially blotted out the entire globe. You can't see anything in the world except the malware packets that are flowing between these systems. That's the capabilities that the attackers who are mounting advanced persistent threats have. So it's very hard to sit back and think about a single voting machine in a precinct somewhere in the middle of Georgia and realize that it's part of a global system that is subject to these kinds of threats. Okay. So the bottom line is that we're seeing these threats increase in 2018. These are advanced persistent threats or zero-day threats. They're mounted and done before you know that they've been there. And as we just heard, hand-marked paper ballots are the way to get around these threats.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I wanted to have Logan start right away, but I did want to make a really quick announcement because we're having some technical difficulties with one of our live feeds. If you have any friends, anyone that you know who's trying to tune into the Georgia Votes paper feed, the live stream, it's not working.
Audio only.
I'm sorry?
Audio only.
Oh, audio only. That's yeah. At least we have that, but if you
from the Georgia Alliance for Social Justice, their feed is working.
Right, so the Georgia, if you do know anyone that might be trying to watch, let them know that the Georgia Alliance for Social Justice YouTube channel feed is working, and we're very sorry, but hopefully they can tune in there. That feed will also be archived, so we will really try and reach out to people and make sure they see it.
Hey everyone, I'm Logan Lamb. You guys care about pace a little bit?
That's good. I'm
okay.
going to do it.
Yeah, I'm a pacer. Yeah.
You can't pace too far.
I'm tethered. Okay, so, I don't know, should I talk about the KSU story? All the shenanigans at KSU?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So let me start at the beginning for y'all. Back in August of 2016, I started getting interested in election security here in Georgia. So, I'm a cybersecurity researcher by trade. I've been doing this for about a decade professionally. And my motivation was to get my hands on a voting machine and hopefully, you know, do some new novel research, find some vulnerabilities, and then help the state ensure that we're running secure elections, right? Because the point of the exercise is always to build more secure systems. Just have to say that. So the way this started out, I went downtown to the election board, and I tried to get a hold of Rick Barron, and I made it as far as his secretary. He didn't really want to talk to me, unfortunately. So I told his secretary what I was hoping to accomplish. And she, you know, ran a note back to him and came back out to me. And there was CES written on my card. And she said, well, we don't really handle the voting machines here. They're all handled at the Center for Election Systems at Kennesaw State University. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? I was a little surprised at that. Prior to going downtown, I looked into Georgia's election systems a little bit, and when you look at verified voting's map, which basically gives a grading of the election systems in every state, Georgia's at the bottom. And the reason for that is we use direct record electronic voting machines. Well, it only gets worse from there because all of these voting machines are managed in a central place, the Center for Election Systems. So, yeah, I thanked the secretary, I went home, and then I immediately went to the Center for Election Systems website with the motivation of getting a little bit of background on the sort of operation they're running there so that I could speak intelligently on, you know, helping them and not come off as some rando kook, right? So, I ended up doing a very, very simple Google search, which basically amounted to, for the site, Center for Election Systems, Kennesaw.edu, give me all the PDFs on this website. Okay. So I hit go, and then, you know, about midway down this Google search, there was a hit for a file called numbered lists. Okay? And I was like, wow, that's kind of wacky. I click on it, and there is a document with tens of thousands of voters' names and some sort of identifier, just a bunch of numbers. And I was like, oh lordy, that probably shouldn't be online, you know? So, you know, intrigued, I immediately started looking at the website a little bit more, and then I wrote a script, like a little program to download everything on this website. I kicked that script off, I went to lunch, and when I came home, or when I came back to work, I ended up having 15 gigabytes worth of data downloaded. Thousands of files. Yeah, and at this point I became very worried that I had stumbled upon something serious. Even within the hour, I identified documents with supervisor passwords, election day supervisor passwords. There were voter registration databases. These databases had records for 6.3 million voters in Georgia, and we had full names, addresses, date of birth, driver's license number, last 4 digits of your social security number. This is all of the information an attacker would require to change your voter registration information on Georgia's online website.
Sorry.
So, let's see, what else was there? There were also files that ended up on the poll books. So when you go to your precinct and you get checked in, these files were meant to be placed on these poll books, okay? And at the end of the day, these are just Windows computers. They're Windows CE computers. It's worse than running Windows XP, you know? Yeah, and these files were online, presumably so people could download them. Yeah, so after identifying these files, I sent an email to Manuel and just letting him know about the sorts of exposure this website is presenting. Oh wait, it actually gets worse. I almost forgot. Sorry. So this web server, it was vulnerable to a known exploit that had been well documented for years. It's trivial to exploit. You can go to YouTube right now and search for Drupageddon. Just YouTube that, and you'll find a 5-minute video on YouTube detailing how YouTube can hack websites like Kennesaw's server. So I got in touch with Manuel. He assured me that they were in fact, remediating the issue. And at that point, I felt like I had done my duty, and I kind of shelved it for a little while. Because this was before the presidential election, and the last thing I wanted to do was stir up a lot of fear needlessly, right? I mean, it doesn't benefit anyone. Well, fast forward to February of 2017, I was working on a project with 2 of my colleagues, Manuel and Chris Grayson, and after doing a good evening of work, I turned to Chris over a beer and I said, "Hey Chris, did I ever tell you about that crazy stuff I saw at Kennesaw State?" And he said, "No, tell me more." So I told him, and then within the next 20 minutes, he too had accessed that website. Yeah. So at that point, fortunately, Chris Grayson knew someone at Kennesaw State University who could escalate this and make sure that the problem was fixed. And he was like, "You want me to get in touch with them?" And I said, "Absolutely. Yeah, we got to get this fixed." And around that time, I also downloaded all of this data for a second time, with the motivation of, at that point, I would have 2 snapshots, and I could then tell if this web server was still being used actively. Well, it turns out it was. So that's a downer. So at this point, Chris notified Andy Green at Kennesaw State University. I think it worked out that they notified GBI, they escalated to the FBI. This culminated in the FBI coming to my apartment, which I would not recommend. They were just making sure they were doing their job. We had a perfectly cordial meeting, and I told them everything that Chris and I had done. Yeah, and yeah, fast forward a couple more weeks, and Kim Zetter got in touch with Chris Grayson, and he was like, hey, is it okay if I give Kim your information? Well, funny thing is I had actually worked with Kim a couple years before on another project where I was wirelessly hacking home security systems. So we had some rapport. And I spoke with her off the record for a very long time, very long time. Yeah, she's a very patient woman. And once again, like,
for months, right?
I think it was for months, yeah. And once again, can't say it enough, we do not want to spread needless fear, right? That is not the point. And what finally made me go on the record was when Reality Winner leaked the NSA document detailing how the Russians were in fact interested in our elections. So as soon as I saw that report, I said, yeah, we're going on record. Like, people in Georgia need to know this. So, yeah, around that time, Marilyn got in contact with me, and I've been helping on the lawsuit ever since. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Do I have more time? I can read for a while.
You do.
Okay, great.
Let's say another 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay. All right, let's see.
Tell them about our trips to Fulton County. English Street and Grady.
Lordy. Okay, so yeah, we've had a couple of trips to the English Street facility in Fulton County. Marilyn and I have been kicked out, even though we were poll watchers for the day, and we should be able to observe this open process, but apparently that doesn't apply to us. We went there again for pre-election LNA testing, and at that point, LNA. Yeah, logic and accuracy testing, sorry. I'm so close to this stuff. Yeah, so this is when election workers basically go around to each machine and they ask the machine, hey machine, are you working right? It says yeah, so I guess we're good. Yeah, so we went to observe that process, and I mean, it's not the workers' fault, but the physical security there is really lacking. One of our colleagues was able to get the punch code pin on one of the doors that would allow us into the facility. There were machines plugged in with their doors unlocked. We could have trivially inserted a malicious memory card into these machines. There were stacks of supervisor cards, which are used to administrate the DREs, just unattended. There were voter access cards, which are used for voting. What else? There were also unattended memory cards. So I've written code not for Georgia's system because I haven't been able to get my hands on one of these machines yet, but for another version of the software, it is trivial to insert one of these cards into your computer and change the vote. It's so easy. Yeah, so we also went to Grady High School and watched them close down the precinct there. And yeah, the election workers went through the process as they normally do. But the interesting part was that once they finished the process, they left the precinct. And we were still there, alone, with the machines. Yeah, it's kind of wacky. Like we were, the doors were locked, so we were just, yeah, if anyone wanted to come in there and check on us, they would have had to have had a key. And
you were locked inside?
I mean, we could get out, but it was locked from the outside. So yeah, so we were okay.
You were the only.
Yeah, we were good. Yeah, and these machines, they were just tied together with a cable tie and a master lock. And there was a lone camera, which who knows if it was on. This was just a school gymnasium. So yeah, a bad guy could have trivially disabled that camera and modified, stolen, you know, had their way with these voting machines.
Hey, Logan, explain why that matters, since it was after the close down of the polls. Why would it have made any difference if we'd gotten into the machines?
Yeah. Yeah, so since this was after they ran the aggregation. So one thing to keep in mind is that all of the voting machines, like all of the different components of our election system, they touch one another, right? Had we been, bad guys, we could have placed malware on these machines so that in the future, when someone inserted a memory card in these machines, malware would be put on the memory cards, and then it could circulate that way and spread within the election system. Yeah, so, yeah, all that's about it. Oh, question? Yeah.
Okay, so it's been established that you probably need to use paper ballots for the actual elections. So the election device, right? You just talked about you were able to get tons of information just on voter registration and other general information about people from KSU server. Ultimately, what do we need to do to protect these voter registration data? Because that's just as likely to allow hacking an election as tinkering with votes themselves.
Can you sort of repeat the question, Logan, before you answer it, and if you can encapsulate it and repeat it for the other?
Yeah, sure. So it's been well demonstrated that these the DREs, the touchscreens, they're super vulnerable. I mean, we're beating a dead horse at this point. And modifying the voter registration data is a great attack vector that a bad guy can take to disenfranchise voters, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, it's more elegant because you don't have to actually change the final vote tally. Yeah, so before I answer that, I forgot something very, very important. So amongst the files that I found on the KSU server, and this is related to voter registration information, there was a training video detailing how to put voter registration information on the express poll book units. Okay, and the steps look something like this. Step 1. Find a computer with an internet connection. Okay. Step 2, go to the Center for Election Systems website, log in, download the update file, put it on a memory card, and then put it in the express poll unit. So, I mean, even if these machines are air-gapped, just for the sake of argument, let's just say they're perfectly air-gapped. Files from the internet are ending up on these machines, right? Yeah, so for protecting voter registration information, I think we just need some industry best practices. Yeah, we don't do industry best practices, and what we should also do is, I think it would be great if we started doing like daily backups of the voter registration data. That way we could go back and see if there's been any sort of anomalous behavior. Yeah, and then you could roll back any malicious changes.
I agree with you. It's best practice is what we need. How do we mandate that? Do we need to be legislation? Does it need to be shame campaign for the media?
Why would there be resistance to that? And is there resistance? Has it ever been proposed?
It's not being practiced.
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. There might be other people up here for the policy answers, but I mean, I suspect it would be a matter of funding. Like so many of these cybersecurity issues come down to a funding issue. Yeah.
So I think the sad part of that story is that there's no one in charge. There's a set of secure practices for running databases that you would find in any large company. It's been promulgated by professional societies. There are standards in place, IEEE, ACM. They all have standards. None of those are uniformly followed because there's no agency that's responsible for saying thou shalt use these standards. And in fact, there's kind of a perverse sense in the industry that my database belongs to me, you can't tell me how to do it, you can't tell me how to protect it. Whether that's legislation, whether that's an agency with some teeth that can manage this collection of systems across the country. The thing to keep in mind is that there's a retail market in this data. So it's in everyone's advantage who owns the data to make it easily shareable. It goes to the companies that run analytic engines, it goes to political parties, it goes to marketers, and so the more you close up these systems, the less available that information is to be bought and sold. And that was one of the entry vectors from 2016. They got into voter registration databases both at the DNC and now we know in local counties, and probably tried to change registration information, change contact information, all of which could be avoided by simple industry best practices in this area.
Thank you very much, Logan, and I appreciate the questions. I see some more hands, and if you don't mind the way that we thought we would do this, and I know it's hard because I have a million questions after every single speaker. We will hold the questions till the end. There are cards on the tables. Please write your questions down and remember them, and we'll really try to get to you. I'm going to hand it over to Marilyn now.
Okay, does this one work?
Yes.
All right, and can you put this in? No, not very well. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, super. Can you put that in? That's what we wanted to do. Okay, you can move to the next slide. And I should say, Caroline, thank you so much for arranging this. People are saying, well, why didn't we hear about this a year ago?
The microphone.
Here. You want it closer. Okay, that's fine. All right, is that better?
Yes.
I think that's a better microphone right there.
Hold it a little closer to you.
Does this one work better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me know if it's too close. All right, I was just saying that we should thank Caroline, and you did, for organizing this. A year ago, we could not have filled this room if Professor DeMillo were buying drinks for everybody all night. He said he did not volunteer for that, by the way. But you know, there were just, no one was interested. They just accepted the election officials' word for the idea, oh yeah, the system's secure, it's not connected to the internet, and all of our employees would never ever do anything to mess up an election. So thank you for being here, thank you for your interest in the subject. So, you know, I'm from North Carolina. I don't live here in Georgia. And I get the question all the time, why are you and your organization, Coalitions for Good Governance, so obsessed with Georgia? By the way, for those of you who are on live stream, I have tweeted out my presentation so you can follow along. If you can go onto Twitter, it's Marilyn R. Marks in the numeral 1. Marilyn R. Marks 1 is you'll find me on Twitter. So Georgia has the largest number of voters in any of the 5 states that are still doing these ridiculous electronic voting computers. Georgia has the largest number, and you're doing it statewide, and so of course Georgia becomes the highest value target for those people who are trying to fix elections and for those people who are trying to mess with elections. Yes. Georgia puts all of its ballot programming and all the tabulation programming in one official's hands. This is a terrible practice, as I'm sure Professor DeMillo will tell you. Other states don't do this. This is such a bad idea. Other states, for the most part, program their ballots at the county level. So for any one person to manipulate a whole state, they would have to go manipulate things in every county. Not in Georgia. One person has all of the levers. And that person happens to be on the ballot this year.
Oh, God.
The centralized system, as Logan just told you, had no security on it. And it's not any better now, really. Maybe you can't get into it, but it's already been broken into. You saw Professor DeMillo's padlock. That was what was there, so do you think it's really kept anybody out? Georgia's system was compromised on that server, and it has not been decontaminated. We have 27,000 voting computers, voting machines in the state. There must be tens of thousands of memory cards. There are optical scanners. None of these things have been decontaminated since it was wide open to anyone who wanted to get in. The Secretary of State and the State Election Board have just not been truthful with Georgia voters. You know, they continue to say, oh, it's secure, it's air-gapped, you know, there's nothing that can happen, and no one's ever proven any problems. Okay. You know, the State Election Board has not met but once this year. We've got a national security issue going on. You hear it on the news every day. The State Election Board has not met but one time this year. Shows their level of seriousness about the problem. Well, the good news is, the other reason we're obsessed with Georgia is because there is a very simple, cheap, easy to do solution that you have right in hand. You all have optical scanners that you already own and can use. You know how to use paper ballots. You're set to go. All it takes is willpower. The law provides for it right now. Somebody was talking about the legislative session last year didn't make any changes. They didn't need to.
Right.
The law permits optical scanners and paper ballots right now. Now, do you have the newest system in the world, the fastest? No, it's an old system, but it's an old workhorse. It's used all over the country. It will work for a few years until you get funding for a new system. But really, you need to trash those paperless DREs. Let's go to the next slide. So that's why we're obsessed with Georgia. All right, so I think most of you know that Coalition for Good Governance and organized this lawsuit with some other plaintiffs. We have two in the room, Laura Diggs and Megan Massat, and they should get a hand for that. Because they're given a hard time by people, I know. We filed this lawsuit a year ago. There have been some procedural slowdowns, primarily because the Secretary of State claims that he is immune from suit. Right. We're going to resolve that issue, but it has really slowed things down. But we are trying to speed things up. Last Friday night, we filed a motion for preliminary injunction, asking the court for effectively asking the court for emergency relief for paper ballots and more, which we'll get back to in a moment. We want paper ballots by November. And we did get a note from the judge's chambers today saying that she is definitely in receipt of the motion. So we hope that it won't be too long before all these facts can be in front of the court. For reference, there are various places you can find the complaint, the motion, and they're online as well. If you go to georgiavotespaper.org, you'll be able to find links to where you can get to these documents. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is what we asked the court to order before November. You've heard us say paper ballots. What we mean by that, paper ballots at early voting locations, paper ballots at the polling location for every voter to get when they arrive at their home polling location. They will deposit it in a ballot box, either an automated one or a dumb ballot box. But anyway, it will be a hand-marked paper ballot where there is an audit trail. We do not mean hand count all the counties. Small counties that want to hand count, they can do that if they want, but the law provides for you to use the optical scanners that you have right now. Now, this is something that we haven't talked about a lot, but I think everybody in the room would probably agree it's much needed. We have asked the court to order a thorough audit of the electronic poll books and the data that's in there. We have seen too many people who are getting turned away from the polls, are being told they're in the wrong location, are being told they're in the wrong party, or some nonsense in terms of not, and Dana herself experienced this on July the 24th during the runoff. And so many people are experiencing these problems. We've asked the court to order the Secretary of State to do a thorough audit before November to make sure that people are not being disenfranchised. And just counting paper ballots on optical scanners is not enough. As Professor DeMillo indicated, we must have post-election audits to make sure that there was not a problem with the optical scanner. And so we've asked the court to order that as well. Let's go to the next slide. I would ask for your help in helping fund this lawsuit. For the most part, it's been parties outside of Georgia. Georgians haven't really invested in this lawsuit yet, but it is really the thing that can secure your elections this coming year. And I'm going to shamelessly say, we need your help. Lawsuits are super expensive. Nobody else is doing this. And it's time for Georgians to invest alongside people from out of state who are invested in Georgia, because Georgia is so important. The size of the state, the influence you have on other states, and we want your investment to help make this work. We have a really good opportunity, and we don't waste the money. We don't have any overhead. I don't take a salary. None of the directors take a salary. You know, this is all going directly to legal fees and travel costs and all of the things that go along with filing a lawsuit. So help me if you can.
Thank you.
Next. I said the physical security is laughable. Logan just told this story. There's Logan standing there along with another colleague, both of whom have been hacking on these computers, okay? Not at that location. So these two guys know what they're doing. We happen to be with some reporters. This is after they closed down the Grady High School polling place, and that's where the voting systems were. These guys could have gotten into it in 2 minutes, maybe, on a slow day. And, you know, affected every future election on these machines, that you use on these machines. It's just crazy. And you're going to hear from the Secretary of State, oh yeah, we have great physical security. Let's go to the next slide. I had some other pictures that I just could not get them uploaded, but that showed the facility that Logan and I were in when we saw cards laying all over the place, ridiculous security. And then on another visit, Professor DeMillo and I went to that same Fulton County election warehouse. We literally walked through the loading dock door. No, I mean, we just walked off the street into the loading dock door, cards laying around everywhere. Did you tell them about the GEM server? Stacks of cards laying everywhere. They, you know, the security was ridiculous. But did you end up saying what we saw about the GEM server? Somebody asked him that. That's one of the questions for you guys, to ask what we saw about the tabulation server. So people say, hey, look, everything works fine. We've never heard of any malfunctions. In this lawsuit, even though we've not done discovery yet, in our position, it is raining malfunctions. People are just sending me emails all the time. Let me tell you what happened to me here. Look at this result. I'm going to show you just a few things that we gave to the court. You will see them if you look at our court filing of last Friday night. You'll see more. Hope you can see this. This is the presidential election. Grady High School, again, we just chose to go there because we'd seen some interesting results from the presidential election. They had 114% turnout. They're really enthusiastic in that.
Nobody knows math.
But it also, and most of you know where Grady is, and you know it's in the 5th Congressional District. I didn't give you a slide, but there were also some votes for Tom Price out of Grady High School.
Yeah.
So how does the computer work that this, yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is Dana's specialty. In Hall County, And this was the election in May. A candidate reported to us that the tape on the door, this is a machine tape, the tape on the door after the tape was finally printed at 10 o'clock at night, it's supposed to be printed right after the machines closed down, was missing 9 races. It was missing her race, the congressional race, the county commissioners' races, and when the machine tape doesn't have the right races on it and no votes cast, you begin to wonder what's going on, particularly when the poll workers signed off on it as being accurate. What causes this? It could be any number of things, as Logan and his colleagues would tell you. We don't know. We'll have to find out. But it's certainly a malfunction and a discrepancy of some kind. Let's go to the next slide. Even though as Dana is going to tell you, when we presented this to the Hall County Board of Elections, the election director stood up and said, there are no discrepancies. Meeting adjourned. We're going, but it didn't even have the candidates' names on it. Meeting adjourned. Over. No discussion.
Tell us what this says.
Okay, this is a recap sheet. At the end of the polling day, this one happens to be in December's mayoral runoff last year. Okay, the recap sheet is prepared by poll workers to compare the number on the tape, the number of ballots cast on the machine tape, to the number of people that signed up to to vote that day in the polling place, and the number of people that were recorded as voting on the electronic poll book. So this was in a precinct or a polling place last December. We had 1,161 people in the poll book that got recorded, but we had 1,388 that actually signed physical sheets of paper to vote, and we had 1,364 ballots cast. Which number is right? They should all be the same.
Yes.
Nobody investigates. They just leave it. And there are hundreds more like this one. Let's go to the next slide. The 6th district special election, which a lot of people still have questions about. This particular polling place had 1,791 voters that came to vote, but they had 1,962 ballots counted. Nobody's doing anything to look into this. They're signing off on it. The Democrats and the Republicans are all signing off on it, saying it's fine. Let's go to the next slide. This is May the 22nd up in Habersham County. You all may have read that there's a lawsuit unrelated to this, where hundreds of people were assigned the wrong ballot or assigned the wrong district and got wrong ballots and voted the wrong ballot for House District 28. So in Mud Creek, they're even more enthusiastic than they are at Grady High School. They had 243% turnout. Now, how could this be? Well, we don't know until there's opportunity to do work on this. My first top of the head guess is that probably the machines are giving the wrong ballot to people. They're giving ballots to people. They're giving Mud Creek ballots to people who don't live in Mud Creek. Think about how that can mess up a local election. So we don't know. Hopefully we will find out through discovery, but it's hard to say, oh, there are no problems with these machines. Let's go to the next slide. What you can do now. There are some steps you can take. You don't have to wait on the judge. Sign the petition. You'll find it at georgiavotespaper.org. This is a petition that goes to the Secretary of State, to the State Board of Elections. Is there, you can't hear me? Is that a problem?
No, I had a question on your...
Oh, okay. All right, we'll do that in a minute. I'm sorry. Okay, there's a petition you can sign. And by the way, the State Board of Elections is going to have a meeting tomorrow. Closed doors, public can't come. But they need to hear. We told them they need to look at those petitions, even behind their closed doors. Okay, County commissioners. Everybody here lives in a county in Georgia, and you have county commissioners. They have the authority, forgetting about the Secretary of State, they have the authority to choose paper ballots and optical scanners for your county. Generally, those county boards are made up of half Democrats, half Republicans. So you've got the opportunity to go to them and say, look, we want paper ballots for November. Now, your county election board. Whoops, I said county commissioners, sorry, those are partisan. I said that wrong. County commissioners are not half Democrats, half Republicans, sorry about that. But they are partisan, but still they have the responsibility to secure the election. Now your county election board, that's the one that's half Democrat, half Republican. They can order paper ballots. Either of these boards can order paper ballots for your county. Go to them and insist that they do it. Why haven't they been doing it? Well, last week, probably because they are not encouraged to do it and nobody demands it, but last week, Secretary Kemp sent a 3-page, single-space letter to these boards telling them basically, oh, those people don't know what they're talking about. The law doesn't really say that. You don't have the authority to do this. So Secretary Kemp is attempting to force the county boards who are considering going to paper ballots not to do it.
I wonder why. Yeah.
So it's going to take some lobbying on you guys' part.
And Marilyn, I wanted to point out that if you go to Georgia Books Paper, you will find everything you need to send to your county commissioners and your board of elections.
Let me repeat what Laura just said. If you go to georgiavotespaper.org, you will find the information that you need to send to your county commissioners, your board of elections, and you'll find their names, their contact information, and you can find letters that we have written, form letters essentially that we have written that have all the right authority cited. Let's go to the next. And that's my contact information. I'm delighted to hear from you. You can, I do better at Twitter than anything else in terms of getting out, what's going on in the lawsuit and our thoughts. That's the easiest way to find what's going on. I should do a better job of doing it under Coalition for Good Governance, but you can find me one way or another. And I know you have questions, but you wanted us to wait on questions, didn't you?
I think it's best if we can keep the questions on the cards and let Dana have the microphone. She'll speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, Marilyn.
Hi everyone, I'm Dana Bowers. I'm you. That's really what I want to say. I'm you. I'm an alarmist, I am an activist, I am an advocate, and these three have pretty much dictated my life for about a year, which is great. I've taken all this information that I've learned and became obsessed, literally obsessed. And I've been able to do things I never thought I was capable of doing. And there's a lot of things that we can do. So I wanted to touch just briefly, because we left off at talking to these boards, and we're encouraging you to do this. And we tell you to go to georgiavotespaper.org and you'll find all the stuff you need to know. Well, you'll also be able to come with me. I'm going to be taking you live with me everywhere that I go. And I just wanted you to know you'll be able to follow me. You'll be able to see a normal human being from Georgia who has never...
It's not going to be.
No, there'll be a lot of us, and I hope you all will come with me. And please come and, at least watch, at least encourage somebody else. Please do this. Because, yeah, I am the one that, we were talking about, we don't need to, strike senseless fear. Well, I'm afraid, and I'm okay with saying that. Because I feel like the one thing we need to do right now is encourage each other to be brave. Marilyn mentioned Hall County, and Hall County was a turning point for me. I had decided, the one thing that I could do in trying to figure out how to fix some things in politics was to get involved with voting machines. Well, now I'm on some kind of panel with experts, and that's weird. So, really, Hall County, I actually also work for a great candidate, Josh McCall. Yay! District. Josh McCall's amazing. That also got me involved where I was able to meet Elena Watkins. She is the candidate that actually took the photograph of that crazy tape you saw. So Marilyn, had said that there were some missing races, and I just wanted to kind of run through what those races were, just because it makes a little more impact when you say exactly what they were. So that would be U.S. House, U.S. Senate, State House, State Senate, County Commissioner, and Solicitor General. Were not on the ticket. Not like just 0 votes, not on there. No category, nothing. The tape was physically shorter. And it was signed and hung on the door. So Marilyn basically coached me through on exactly what we were going to do and how we were going to approach this elections board. Like she said, we were confronted with the fact that, this elections director had said, no discrepancies, we did not see anything at all. We had the chairman who actually kind of raised his voice at us and kind of told us we were crazy after we had just sat and spoke to them. And that's something you're going to face. And that's okay. Please, it's okay. It's okay if someone yells at you. It's okay if they even show up with armed guards, because that's what they did the next time we were there. We had 5 police officers for 4 members of the public and 5 board members and a chairman. We had 1 armed police officer before, so that was a big difference. The funny part is they didn't know they were on the news, so they actually didn't know when they said no discrepancies that we had been on the news a few days earlier and shown them on CBS 46. So we were kind of able to have a little window in to speak with them, and those are the type of negotiations that are going to get really difficult when you do go and speak with these boards. For me, just as a citizen, I mean, some of you know me. I have yelled at a few buildings in my life. I've been out in the streets doing some crazy things. So, because of that, I'm not afraid. But the only thing I can tell you to do is I can just encourage you to stand up to yourselves to these boards. You are going to be told that what you're saying is not true. The facts that we are providing you through GeorgiaVotesPaper.org, they are true. They're true. They are written in the law. You have a right as a citizen to stand up for your own vote and everyone else's in this state. And just expect that it's going to be a hard road, but I'll be there with you, so will they. And I'm telling you, Marilyn's a good teacher, so if I can learn some stuff from her, anyone can. So just, that's really it. I would just love to activate anyone that's interested. You can always contact me. I'm all over the Georgia Votes Paper page now, so it's up and running. Any questions that you have would be great. But that's where we'll be going, and I just hope we get there soon.
Okay, the moment we've all been waiting for. Obviously, we're going to take one question from this audience and then alternate. Dana and Megan are looking online at our live streaming audience, so we'll alternate questions. I have a lot of cards here, but if you are in the room and you wrote a card, feel free to raise your hand. Because I can, I'm going to squeeze in a really quick question first, related to, a lot of what the end of the discussion was. Excuse me, I have a cold. Kemp's office is obviously going to, well, you talked about the 3-page letter, single-spaced. That letter went to the Board of Elections telling them that they cannot adopt paper ballots without a change in the law. What if we go to our Board of Elections and that's what our Board of Elections officials tell us? Oh, we have a letter from the Secretary of State. He's our boss. Sorry. Meeting adjourned.
How do we deal with it? Okay, can you guys hear me with this microphone?
Yes.
Okay. 1, the Secretary of State is not the boss of the county commissioners, and he is not the boss of the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections those people are nominated by your party. The two major parties nominate who's on that board. And you vote for your county commissioners. They answer to you. They do not answer to the Secretary of State. Both of those boards will have county attorneys. You can tell them, look, if you want paper ballots the way your voters, your constituents want paper ballots, then tell the county attorney to find the way to do it. It's clearly in the law, If they don't understand it, they can go look at our lawsuit that it clearly spells out how to do it. The answer is the people responsible at the local level are not responsible to the secretary, they're responsible to you. They can do it if they want to. Make them want to.
Perfect, thank you, Marilyn. And let's take a question from the audience. Again, I have a lot of cards, but let's take someone who will raise their hand if you've already given me a card. I see a raised hand right there. Why don't we start with you if you could stand up.
I gave a card, but you can rip it up. I call the senators daily. And last week there was a rejection from the Congress regarding additional funding for cybersecurity. I wanted to, and they said to me that, well, Georgia has funding for this kind of thing, cybersecurity. Where does Georgia stand right now? How do we hold the senators accountable? And that vote, the rejection of the vote by all Republicans is obscene, because we've got not only cybersecurity for our elections, but our infrastructure. So where do we go with all of this?
So there were two pieces of legislation that made it through. One was a $380 million allocation to the states. That's going forward. That will be spent over a 5-year period of time. What you're talking about was an additional 180 million, was it? 380 was the first
I think it was the second phase.
Oh, okay. So it was this second slug of money, and we haven't heard the last of that yet because legislation has not come out through the congressional committees. We won't see that until next year. I'm sort of focused right now on what are we going to do with the first allocation. We're getting ready to buy new voting machines. We want to make sure that the money is spent studying the right kind of technology to use for the next time.
May I add to that to say that I'm more focused on November. While that's a very good question about what we're going to do later, any kind of funding that's coming from Congress is going to be for way down the road. In Georgia, even if we had a pot full of money today, 2020 is not realistic for putting that money to use for a new voting system. You know, to do it right is going to need 3 to 4 years at least. And I'm not trying to be discouraging about that, but it's true. You know, Georgia's coming from such a place of being so far behind. You need to give yourselves 3 to 4 years and a new Secretary of State to do it right. So all the funding in the world right now is not going to be helpful. You've got a cheap, inexpensive solution that will get you through. Just use it.
So what would be the impact of voting on paper right now? The dollar impact?
I think that it would save money. If you would use the paper ballots and optical scanners you already have 1,000, plenty enough. They're basically free. The used scanners are basically free. I bought 4 of them for $4.25 each a couple of weeks ago. You would be given them, but the point is that the DRE machines are very labor intensive, super expensive to put up, take down, transport, secure, so yeah, but they're super expensive to program and all of that. It is far cheaper to print paper ballots.
So we already have scanners.
Scanners?
States will loan us scanners if we need them. We know where the Staples is, so we know how to buy paper. I think we're in good shape.
We're in good shape. It's just that the election officials want to act as if they need an enormous pile of money to do this. Well, you know who's influencing them are the vendors who think it's a great idea to go fund a huge pile of money. One of the reasons I believe that our solution has gotten no traction on using what you've got, and Rich did an op-ed about this that was published in USA Today in March, in the middle of March, that this should be done across the nation for states like ours. No traction. Why? Because nobody makes any money from it. There are no consultants that are going to make any money. There's no vendor that is going to make any money. And it requires a change. And it's going to be a little administrative inconvenience for the election official. So it's up to you to push them.
I saw that in Alabama. The
paper ballots with optical scanners?
Yes, I mean, it is the most used system in the United States right now, is optical scanners, paper ballots, hand-marked paper ballots. Alabama's got all new equipment. If Alabama can do it, Georgia can do it. Virginia, you know, in Alex's video, he had said Virginia was a state. Since the time that video was made, they decided in September of last year that after the DEF CON hacking, they decided in September that they were getting rid of all the machines like Georgia's. They had it all done and changed by their gubernatorial election in November. It can be done, you just have to have the will to do it.
We do have a question from do I need to come over there? Yeah. We have quite figured out this process.
Thank you. We have 9 questions so far from online. The first is from Waterfall2027 on Twitter, who asks, how is it not a huge conflict of interest for SOS Brian Kemp to be overseeing an election that he is running for governor of Georgia in? Why does he not require
The cheering may have blocked the last part of that question. Why is he not required to step down?
Rich may have something he wants to add to this, but I've worked in a lot of different states, and what first comes to you and you'll hear from the officials is, well, it's very normal for secretaries of state to be on the ballot for an election that they are overseeing. What's very different here in Georgia is that all of the ballot programming is done centrally by Secretary Kemp. And he has all of the levers. The other thing that's different is our system here in Georgia is not auditable, so nobody can go back and audit. The other problem is there is no transparency and no public oversight that is permitted here. It's in the law, but election officials here stand in the way. So why is it not a conflict of interest? It's certainly a conflict of interest. Why is it not against Georgia law? That's a really good question. They should have never, ever centralized all of this to begin with. That's the issue. It's not the fact that he's on the ballot. We want our secretaries of state to be elected officials. And the fact that he's on the ballot isn't the problem. The concept is being on the ballot for anything. You know, should a Secretary of State run his own election? No, because there should be so much transparency that it doesn't matter. There should be so much distribution of the work that it doesn't matter. That he should never, no person should ever have that many controls over any election, his own included. So the issue is in how the voting system is set up, not so much that he's on the ballot, but I think that he's got plenty of precedent in this state for secretaries of state resigning when they're on the ballot, right? Yeah. It's happened, at least a couple of times before him? Mm-hmm. I don't know why he would want to put himself in the position.
They resigned so they could raise money. They didn't resign because they were overseeing them.
When you look at her statement, she mentions conflict of interest. I think we have a question from this gentleman back there, if you could stand up.
People say to vote absentee so you have a paper record of your ballot. Is there any value to that?
You want to take one?
Yes. So there is a value. You vote on paper. It's scanned. The difficulty is that we're not quite sure what the chain of custody is for those paper ballots. So you have to have a leap of faith to get some assurance that they're going to be handled properly. But that's exactly a method that you would use to ensure that your vote is recorded and kept on paper.
If we do not get the counties and the state to go with paper ballots and the judge does not order it, that's the next best thing, to use absentee ballots. But sometimes it's a hassle to use them. You can't vote on election day with an absentee ballot, but it's the next best thing to getting ballots issued in the polls.
I just wanted to answer a comment here that manuals is pronounced like manuals. I've been pronouncing it wrong, I'm sure, so I apologize to manuals for pronouncing it wrong. So sorry. I know we have some questions online, and then I'm going to get to a couple more here in the room. So let's go online now.
Okay, this is an interesting question because it gets both to old-fashioned voter suppression and electronic voter suppression that can happen when voter rolls are hacked, as possibly the Russians did in October. But this is from Susan Pinnell. She says, my question to the experts. An area of concern for me is the voter rolls. With Kemp removing 800,000 voters last year, and the stories I've read about during the primary where voters were told they needed to vote in a different place, even though they hadn't moved, voters finding subtle changes made to their address, and being forced to vote provisionally, other than encouraging every voter to check their registration status down to exact address and polling location, what can we do? Can the voter rolls be made secure? Is there no paper backup for voter rolls in each county?
Here, this one's better.
So there were a lot of double negatives in that question. I think the answer is no to all of them. There are no real paper backups. It's not clear what the official role is. But what the person is suggesting is exactly one of the attack vectors that the intelligence community tells us was used in 2016. In fact, if you read the Robert Mueller indictment of the 12 Russians, he goes into great detail about how this is done. That's a part of the process that absolutely has to be tightened up. It's a grave concern it's of concern in Georgia because we lost last year. We lost electronic poll books with removable magnetic media on them. Those poll books were never recovered. The media was never recovered. For all we know, they were on the next Aeroflot flight to St. Petersburg to be programmed for the next Georgia election.
I have one thing to add to that. So with the data that was made available on the Kennesaw State server, it contained all of the information necessary for someone to, in an automated fashion, change everyone's voter registration data on Georgia's MVP website.
And to do it selectively as well if they wanted to, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because it only requires
So what she just said and what your answer is. They didn't understand. She said you could do it selectively. You could choose like.
Yeah, can you repeat that statement that you just made about the MVP site and that was very good.
Yeah, sure. So are y'all familiar with the MVP website for Georgia? Yeah, so a reasonable attack would be, since the bad guys would have this voter registration data, they could, drop every 10th person in a predominantly Democratic area. Or, drop people by any number of metrics in an automated fashion. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, and then do what? If you could finish that, yeah.
Disenfranchised voters. Yeah.
May I add?
Oh, please.
Additionally, we keep encouraging everyone, go check your voter registration information. And we think that's plenty. But if you read our lawsuit, the things that got filed last Friday and the details, and read Dana's written testimony, and it happened to a lot of people. Their voter registration data that very morning on the MVP Secretary of State website was accurate. She gets to the polling place and they go, no, you're in the wrong place. She had taken a screenshot. This was not, she was just sleepy and looked at the wrong thing. No, she had screenshots. So there is something going on even at the electronic poll book level, that the voter registration doesn't necessarily match the ballot you're going to get or the precinct. There is another written testimony in there, and if Rob Cadle's in the audience tonight, he's a researcher at Georgia Tech. He arrived at early voting. He lives in the 6th congressional district. He was given a electronic ballot, supposedly in an automated way, for the 5th congressional district. And you know, his voter registration was absolutely right, but something in the system was triggering him getting the wrong ballot.
So let me just add one thing to that. So to focus on the voter registration databases is exactly the right question to ask. These are targeted smart weapons. You don't need to change much in the voter registration databases in order to sow chaos on election day. And even if you don't sow chaos, you can sow chaos in the turnout models that the political parties use. So simply changing a phone number throws off the statistical models that the Republicans and Democrats use to get out the vote for their candidates. If you use that in a smart way, you can change 100 or 200 votes in a multi-thousand vote precinct, and as we saw in Michigan, swing the election completely for the entire state.
Yeah, right. As well as another thing you can do, you can leave all of the voter data just fine, so that when anybody checks it, it's fine. But code a ballot combination, the ballot style. Everybody has a code of what their ballot style is. You won't know that because it doesn't appear on your voter registration record. All you have to, the bad guy has to do is change that code. You will get the wrong ballot. And what we know is that there have been hundreds of people in this past year's election, who have gotten the wrong ballots and haven't been able to vote for the right candidates.
So and we actually have someone in the audience, Jasmine Clark, who wrote on her card a description of an incident that she experienced. Jasmine also happens to be a candidate. And I think that I'm going to let Jasmine describe her experience, but I think the question is, what do you do when you go to the precinct and they tell you it's the wrong one, or where they hand you the wrong voting card? I mean, do you just go home and say, oh well, I can't vote in this election?
Definitely not. And I think what Jasmine's going to tell you is you don't leave, you keep fighting. But I think what Jasmine did and what Dana did and what Rob Cadle did, document ahead of time, when you're there, right after you leave, and vote your provisional ballot. No matter what happens to you, you insist, if they don't let you vote otherwise, insist on voting a provisional ballot. If you're an eligible voter, it will be counted, and you can be assured of that. You can follow it through, but don't give up, and don't walk away and think, oh, I'll remember all those details later.
Record as much information as you can.
Right.
Serial number of the voting machine, the voting computer, and the ballot ID. Both of those things appear on the screen.
Take photographs. You recommend,
If you can, they probably won't let you.
Right. True.
Do that. But you can write on an index card.
Okay. Jasmine, I know that you have a story to tell. If we could do that quickly and then go to another online question.
I will be super brief. My voice is really loud, so I'm sure everybody in the room can hear me. So I'm Dr. Jasmine Clark, and I'm actually a candidate for House District 108. Because I'm a candidate, I know exactly where I'm supposed to vote. So when I went to vote in the runoff election, they tried to send me away after they had sent two people before me and a person after me away as well, saying that we were in the wrong precinct. And when I got up there, they tried to tell me I was in the wrong place. And I told them, no, I'm not in the wrong place. I know exactly where I'm supposed to be. After 25 minutes of making phone calls and being adamant that I was in the right place, they say, oh, come try again. And the second time, they then tell me, oh, never mind, you're in the right place. They must have updated it. First of all, that's not a thing that should be able to happen. And actually, my question was, I was told that that's not supposed to be able to happen. And I was wondering if any of those vulnerabilities that you guys talked about would allow for things to be changed in real time, because that's pretty much what happened in my situation.
What county was this?
This was in Gwinnett County. It was in Precinct 12, which is actually the most Democratic precinct in my district. And I won't say in Gwinnett, but it's a very heavily Democratic precinct. And so I have a feeling that that had something to do with it. I do not know who was getting turned away, but just statistically, that in that precinct, most of those people were probably Democrats. I know this is nonpartisan, but it's important because it doesn't matter who you're voting for, you should be confident. And to me, that's a form of voter suppression that's subtle, because sending people away just creates a roadblock, because they're likely not going to go to a second place, especially if they're going early in the morning right before work. I had time, but everybody doesn't have time to do that. And so that's why I think it's really important to get this story out so people know what's going on, and also to know don't leave. So fill out a provisional ballot. So I did have a question though, and that was, can things be changed in real time? And if so, how do you get past that?
They're not supposed to be changed in real time. There's not supposed to be a connection between the electronic poll books. My sense is that they don't have enough expertise to actually change them in real time, so let's not make them any stronger an adversary than they actually are. But what happens is that the e-poll books sometimes simply don't work, or they don't work the way that the worker has been trained to use them, and so they go to a backup printout of election rolls, and that becomes a manual process that's prone to error. If you ever see a live connection between the people that are checking you in and the internet, you should make a note of it and report it, because that's not supposed to happen.
And how would you say to see a live connection? Just because I want to be able to educate other people on this issue, are you saying like must record, or? I
asked them. So when I went to vote, I said, by the way, are you guys connected at all? And they said, oh, our connection is down. I don't know if it was down and it's supposed to be down, or it's down because they didn't know the password for the router. I just don't know. But they were pretty quick with the comeback. It's not working, and in fact the system wasn't working. They had to go to a printed backup.
Carolyn, may I add something? And Jasmine, thank you for submitting your sworn testimony to the court. What that is going to allow us to do is, when the court finally opens things for discovery, we are going to trace that to the very end of the line, to wherever Logan can help us find whatever happened there. So we're going to look.
Well, it's not from online, it's actually from me. Could someone please tell us where that we can actually track those records for the provisional ballots on MVP? Like, where can they find that, and how easy is that to access so they can follow the steps of their ballot?
I believe that that's going to be on a county by county basis to find out if your provisional vote is counted. I would be calling before the vote is certified, maybe even make a trip to the office if you can't get an answer. But the provisional work is done at the county level. By the time it would ever reach the Secretary of State, it's going to be too late if there's a problem. So call your county board of elections.
Okay, great. One more, another question from the crowd. I'm sorry, this gentleman has his hand up first. Hopefully we can get to everybody.
Can I use the microphone?
Of course.
I gave you a card earlier, so this is fine.
Okay, good.
So I know paper ballots are what we need to go to for this election, and really for all elections, but I have a feeling that the vendors are going to be poking around trying to get their equipment sold. So my question is, and I'm an engineer, I'm an electrical engineer, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I know how vendors, they're going to come in and say, okay, you're going to get this system for a certain cost, but that cost does not include security, it doesn't include maintenance over the lifetime of the product, it doesn't include system-wide security, it doesn't include the labor that it takes to maintain the machines and to set everything up. So how can we make sure that when those costs come to the politicians who are making the decisions, how can we make sure that they include all those hidden costs that really need to be there for us to have a secure system that aren't going to be written on the glossy pamphlets that they hand out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the sad truth of the election technology industry is that it's structurally unable to deliver the kind of security that's needed to run an election in the United States. It's a market that's controlled by 3 vendors in the U.S. The total size of the market is $300 million. That sounds like a lot of money, but a $300 million market to the major vendor in the industry translates to less than 1 engineer devoted to security. So they have no way of building security into their systems. They simply cannot afford it. And so the issue of what they charge for is really interesting. It really gets to the issue of where do lobbyists stand in the allocation process. But you have to step back from that and say, is this who we want to put in charge of voting in the state, in the country? And the answer is no. There are long-term solutions for that. It's not going to help us right now, but as long as each of these vendors is allowed to control their own intellectual property, to maintain their own secrecy around what goes into their systems, and not be required to share it among their competitors, we're never going to get beyond that. What happens is, what usually happens in these kinds of industries is a revolving door between officials who buy the equipment and people who wind up working for these companies. It all goes into sales. None of it goes into building. You as an engineer should know what it takes to build a new feature into these systems. They are only going to build features into these systems that cost nothing to produce and sound glitzy enough so they can charge a premium for the next time around.
Hey Rich, can you talk about what was wrong with the system that the Secretary of State and many others were trying to push on Georgia last spring?
You mean the ballot record, the printed
barcode ballot?
Yeah, the printed ballot record. So you know, there was a realization, I think, in the legislature that not having paper backups of votes was a big deal, and so their approach was not to record the choices that voters made on paper. It was to print out what the machine said the voter had done in the form of a ballot record. Now, that's awful, but it's not as horribly awful as what they were actually pushing. So what they were pushing was a system where you would show a receipt to a voter and have the voter verify, yes, this is the choice that I made. I think there are a lot of reasons for doubting whether or not that works, but let's just suspend disbelief for a second and say that it works. On that same piece of paper was printed a barcode. What do you suppose the scanner counted? Did it count the actual English language version of the vote or the barcode? It counted the barcode. Who in the room can read barcodes? None of us can read barcodes. So you have no way of verifying what was there. There's a whole. When I gave my remarks, I said there are these areas of cybersecurity that are devoted to different hacking specialties. There's a hacking specialty called barcode poisoning, which is useful if what you want to do is introduce malware into a system that's reading barcodes. And so what they were trying to do in the General Assembly this last spring was introduce a new costly form of technology that wouldn't help voting at all, but would introduce yet another vulnerability into the system. We need to push back on it. Every time you hear about a bell and whistle in our voting system, you can't quite figure out, so what is this useful for? You should think it's not useful for anything except making money for one of the vendors. Well, the most reliable record that you have of what the voter intended on election day is the mark that they made on the ballot. Not some computer's interpretation of that mark, not a selection on a touch screen. It is the actual mark that appears on the piece of paper. Now, I know that there are issues with paper ballots. We're talking about a human activity. Recording human choices is prone to all kinds of errors, but it's not prone to cyber errors. It's not prone to cyber attacks. So what we want is a paper ballot that at the moment the voter casts his or her vote represents what that intention was. That's the ballot of record that gets carried through the entire process. If you ever need to recount, if you ever need to conduct an audit, you have to audit against something that's independent and reliable. And that hand-marked paper ballot is that independent record.
By the way, this is a nonpartisan talk. There are 3 candidates running for Secretary of State. 2 of them have said they want hand-marked paper ballots. The 3rd wants the barcode balloting. Do your research.
Can I ask a very quick clarifying question? Are you proposing that the hand-marked paper ballots can be used, can be available in the case of an audit or a recount? So in other words, they're not automatically used in the election, only if there is an audit or a recount.
So
there's a backup.
The method of choice, so people that have looked at possible better election systems would say that what you want is for the voter to hand mark a paper ballot, for that paper ballot that the voter just marked to be scanned by a scanning machine. Now, there are risks associated with the scanning machine, but because you've maintained the original paper ballot, at the end of the day you can go back and conduct an audit. So if there were some malfunction, some penetration, some hacking in the scanner, you would at the end of the day detect that, because you have these 2 independent pieces of information to go on. As soon as you introduce another piece of technology into that process, you destroy the mathematics that makes the independence work, and it becomes impossible to conduct a statistically valid audit.
And audits are supposed to catch just human errors as well. You can run a batch of ballots through twice by total mistake, but an audit will catch that. And to go back to make sure everybody understands the answer to your question, we want paper ballots this November to be handed out in the polls. We don't want anybody to even see a DRE machine, except we can have some similar for people who do have accessibility needs. But nobody would be voting on the types of DREs that we have now. You'd be marking a paper ballot. It would be counted on optical scanner. They would be retained for recounts and for audits.
Okay, so to wrap up the online questions, you answered a lot of questions about absentee ballots. Shoe Fly-In on Twitter and Waterfall 2027 asked some more questions about that. And Waterfall 2027 had the idea that is the state of Georgia required to count every absentee ballot? Could everyone request a paper absentee ballot and force Bryan Kemp to use paper ballots? Or is there a chance that they would not be counted? And then the second question is, and this comes from Priscilla, modified a little bit, is because everybody is going to be going to their County Board of Commissioners and County Board of Elections and attending meetings and writing them and asking for paper ballots, hand-marked paper ballots in the midterm, can you get all of that information, the meeting dates, and the people to contact from your website?
GeorgiaVotesPaper.org.
Right.
Right. Okay, let's start with that last question. We have not attempted to write down or to try to search and record when everybody's Board of Election meeting is. It's just, that's just taking up too much bandwidth. But if you go to your county's Board of Election website, most of them are pretty good about posting their meeting dates. And you can find the contact information on GeorgiaVotesPaper.org, but you'll need to check your own website. Going to the question of absentee ballots, do they count? This is an old wives' tale that they don't count unless it's a close election. That is just not true. Eligible absentee ballots for eligible voters do count, but they have to be there on time. The signatures better match. There are some hurdles there, and so it is not necessarily a simple, easy trick to get the absentee ballots done on a massive basis. There will be administrative issues and post office issues. Fulton County had a lot of those issues. It is much better if the judge does not order paper ballots and you can't get your county election officials to do it. That will be the backup. Go to order an absentee ballot, make sure it's in on time, but that's really not the best choice. And don't wait for the court either. Go ahead to your county election officials, because they're going to start saying, oh, we don't have enough time. Don't wait for the court to decide. Get the local decision made first. That, when the county boards of elections and county boards of commissioners start choosing paper ballots, that's what will put pressure on Bryan Kemp.
Great, thank you. We did have a couple of hands raised. Question right here.
So I became increasingly involved and increasingly afraid after John Ossoff's election. I don't know if it happened to you all, and started participating. I even joined Marilyn at some closing of the polls where we were, and Professor DeMillo, where we were literally chased with a guy holding his taser in his hand. I was also there with my daughter. I am right now, I'm terrified. There's 90 days for election. We have seen you know, recently all the speeches from the candidates talking about Georgia being one of the most unhappiest states. I realize there's a disconnection between what Georgians want and the elected officials. We see the video of Sacha Baron Cohen, of an elected official pulling down his pants. These are the guys that are legislating us now, and I'm absolutely terrified. We went to the closing of the polls, and then we went to the Board of Elections meeting of the Fulton County, and Rick Barron was there, and they literally mocked us. We didn't get any response when we told them we'd been chased with a guy with a taser. When we wanted to exercise the Sunshine Law that exists since 1864. Doors were shut in our faces, we were treated like criminals, we were pushed out of the building where we were supposedly allowed to watch this. So, you know, it's really, I know we have to invade them with these letters, but I also know that Georgia has gone to the airport to protest the Muslims. Georgia has gone and marched for the children. We have done so many things. I think we have to manifest the public sentiment that we can really have incredible people making these decisions, and we're getting the worst of the worst. So this is also an invitation to you for these incredible efforts to reunite the community and exercise the public sentiment, and maybe go with pots and pans to the Capitol, and maybe occupy. You know, I am an activist. We need to express this feeling that I have inside. This is so bad. And we are at the edge of the precipice. It is do or die. The worst of the worst can take care of Georgia as of November 7. What are we going to do about it? Thank you.
You know, that raises an excellent point. You're saying we can bang pots and pans at the Capitol. Absolutely. We have no doubt that we've got a lot of energy in Atlanta. It's key. We have 159 counties in Georgia. It is absolutely key that the word gets out to everyone, that passion gets out to everyone. And there was a question, are we going to be doing more of these events around the state? We would love to, but one of the reasons we are filming and doing a live stream is that if we can't be there live, we have the program. We will. This is just the beginning tonight. This is the kickoff event to a lot of grassroots energy that is being activated from today until Election Day in November. And rest assured, anyone who wants to be involved in Atlanta, of course, it seems that's where we're all living now, or anyone who can help us in other counties. Dana has traveled all over the state. If someone is visiting a relative in Savannah and you want to help them work with their Board of Elections in their county, this is what we're talking about, is that we absolutely have to make this a statewide effort, and we will.
If you're nervous, I'll go with you.
No
kidding.
I have a question. I have a statement.
Yes, please.
Okay. I just wanted to let everybody know that there is now a voter protection director. Her name is Sarah, S-A-R-A, Tindall, G-H-A-Z-E-L.
Can you say her name, Sarah?
Sarah Tyndall Gazelle. She's a voter protection director.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying this is I'm on the lawsuit with Maryland. I'm a plaintiff. I'm sorry. Laura. Hey, Laura. Okay, so I live in Blackwell 01, and we were going around to all of the precincts and taking pictures of the tapes. So I was standing there taking pictures of the tapes, and the poll workers were walking out of the building, so I opened the door, and there they walked out with their pizza boxes and their lunch boxes. And granted, those people are, it's a 12-day job. It's not easy. So, okay, sorry. Should I start over? You don't want me to. So anyway, the poll workers had parked on the other side of the building, and my husband and I had driven over there and parked like probably from me to Logan. Okay, where they were coming out. His car was running. I was taking pictures of the tapes. They brought all the machines out, left them there, and walked to their cars. If my husband and I had nefarious purposes, we could have just put machines and everything into our car. So I just want everyone to know that if you have the time, I think we all need to keep an eye on who is running our elections, and if you have the time, sign up to be a poll watcher. Very important.
Absolutely important poll watcher in the November elections, but again, we have a lot of work to do between now and then. We wouldn't even know, as Marilyn said, we wouldn't be here today. Marilyn and everyone else has been working hard on this for years. Now we know. We have those examples. We know about it. Between now and November, let's make sure that the security at the voting computers is safe. And we have one more from Smythe.
Hello, I'm Smythe Duval. I am a candidate for the Georgia Secretary of State, and I fully support moving to paper ballots right away. I have recently spoken to the Cobb County Board of Elections, was able to make a presentation there. I would like to go to other counties, but I would like to actually go with somebody who lives in that county. So if you're on the board fence of actually going to your Board of Elections or going to your county commissioners, contact me, especially if you're in the metro area. All right, let's go together, and I would more than happy to go with you. We would both make use of the public comments and talk to either the Board of Elections or the county commissioners about how important it is to go ahead and remove the risk for the 2018 midterms. Again, my name is Smythe Duval. Thank you.
And another question, yes?
I just want to encourage all of us to take what we've learned tonight back to your church, your synagogue, your temple, your office, wherever, your knitting group, that we've got to get a grassroots, this message out. And I feel like marching too, I don't know. But
have to.
Wherever you can, give this information, commit yourself to give it to 5 more people or something so we can get this going forward. November is right around the corner.
It is right around the corner. And, you know, election officials do have to prepare for early voting by the 1st of October, very latest. They're going to need to have placed ballot orders, etc. So we can't say, oh, let everybody get through their summer vacation and then we'll go see our boards. No, they need to be hearing from you tonight. And if you go on the Georgia Votes paper website, you will see links to the letters we have sent. Click on them, forward them. You can also go to, if you don't find it there, go to my Twitter feed, which is Marilyn Marks 1. You will find somewhere in all of that the letters to the Board of County Commissioners and Elections. They're going to tell you, oh no, we can't do it. We're too, you know, we don't have the authority. They do have the authority. And if they tell you that, write me. I'll keep sending you the authority that they have to do it. Don't take no for an answer. Make them think about it this way. If they suddenly had a countywide power outage, you know, some kind of natural disaster, or if the week before the election they found out that they had a virus that kept the machines from working, what would they do? They would use paper ballots, right? they should consider this their natural disaster warning and go ahead and take the authority that, of course, the law gave them the authority to use paper ballots when there's a problem. Well, even the Department of Homeland Security is telling us that machines like Georgia has are a national security threat. If they have a national security threat, they clearly have the ability to take emergency actions.
Yes.
And they just need to have the will to do it. And shouldn't it be a partisan issue? Excuse my platform, I'm sorry.
No, that was a great tip to, compare it to a natural disaster. And my question is, so you're saying to reference the emails on the website, do those need to be tailored for each county, or can your emails be used and directly sent no matter what county you live in?
Right. The emails that we have sent, and we have sent them to all boards of elections, all boards of county commissioners. Now they're two separate letters because they have two different types of authority, so be sure you know which one you're sending. But they've already gotten them, they've gotten a mass letter from us. The state law is the same for every county. They all have this authority. So get the letter and just forward it. You don't have to write one for yourself because it takes a lot of time and a lot of detailed knowledge. Just say, we insist that you do this. And your next meeting, we're bringing a bunch of people with us. Bipartisan people. Bring candidates with you. Boards of elections will listen to candidates when candidates are standing there saying, you're affecting my votes. Boards of county commissioners are elected. They are responsible to people. You can get to them. It's hard to get to Bryan Kent or the State Board of Elections, particularly since they only have closed-door meetings. But you can get to your local county election board member. Likely somebody who lives, in your neighborhood or goes to your church. Those people have the decision-making authority that you need.
And, someone mentioned take it to your church, take it to your knitting group. I think that what we should all start is a paper ballot advocacy group. Let's start groups within our own communities, or a group. All we need is one group of a couple of really devoted people, excuse me, within each county who will send those letters. Follow up when they don't get a response. Follow up again and again. Email Marilyn when you're stuck or you have a question. That's all it takes. It really just takes a few people in each county. And yeah, we have a lot of counties in this state, but we know we can do it, and we have to do it.
Dana is doing a lot on the Georgia Votes paper. She can help supply you with the resources.
Right.
But going in person to the meetings, even if you face 5 armed guards like we did. But the message here was, look, we don't want you unwashed voters questioning the elections. We just can't, we cannot put up with that. Right. That kind of attitude of, we're the election officials, they're our elections, not your elections. It's kind of their attitude. Yes. We need to remember, these are our elections.
That's right. Yeah. Wrong. We're going to take more questions, but we have a quick announcement.
Sorry, I didn't want to hijack this. Fulton County,
where we are,
they meet, where we are right now, they meet on the 9th.
Who is the day?
August 9th. The Fulton County Board of Elections. So they meet on the 9th, which is very soon at 10 o'clock in the morning. So they are at
1:30.
They're at 130 Peachtree Street, Southwest Atlanta. 130 Peachtree.
I'm going to be there. Peachtree.
I'm going to be there. We're all going to be there.
I'll be there.
Yes. And that board is good about taking public comment. You sign in. Now they're very strict about it. You can sign in, and a bunch of you can go and give them your public comment. Send them a letter ahead of time so that they can't sit there and say, "Oh well, we haven't had a chance to consider this. We don't know anything about this." Send it ahead of time and tell them to find out from their county attorney that they've got the power to do it, and they need to do it.
And again, their names are on the georgiavotespaper.org website.
That's correct.
And I'm not trying to make work for Dana, but
no, bring it on.
Is the calendar on there as well? I know.
No, we are not trying to pull together calendars for everybody. We just don't have the bandwidth.
Right.
But if there's a volunteer in the room who would like to find out what every 159 county schedules are, we'll be happy to accept it.
Aren't those publicly posted?
Absolutely, but we just don't have the bandwidth
of course.
to do 100.
Sure.
Send
so
me
again,
some volunteers.
Again,
and I'll connect
each
you
county knitting group, each county group. That's your assignment. Obviously, that's the other thing you need to know when your Board of Elections meetings are. And
we will find a way.
And let us know. Let us know the results.
Come to us afterwards. We'll find a way to activate it.
Yeah. Question?
More of a comment. DeKalb County also will meet again on the 9th. A lot of them have a regular Thursday meeting. One helpful comment they gave us, besides their lack of general enthusiasm for what we had to tell them, was, oh, sorry, my voice does not project.
They know.
They did say not to CC anyone else on those emails to the county board.
Don't CC them. Address it to them.
Right.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
They just said they will discard the email
if they're just copied on something. They said if they're just copied on something, then they don't feel like they have to respond. If it's addressed to them, they will respond.
So you have to send an email to each individual one.
Yeah.
So,
I think that comment was to say, when you're writing to your board, address them in the 2 line.
Right.
Okay.
And just them.
Separate emails to each board member.
I don't see why you would have to write separate, but
no, I don't know.
These guys are public officials. Right.
Married to the chair.
No, don't just write to the chair.
Right. So,
No, do not just write to the chair.
Yeah.
My advice would be, I know this is not what they want, but too bad. They are the public officials that are responsible to us. Write to the chairman, write to every member, copy everybody, copy the county commissioners, and copy the newspaper.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent.
Because I send it to all mine, and they forward it to the Board of Elections.
Right. As you can tell, I'm not very obedient.
Well, we're trying to come across as we're your local, your local voters, and we want to help you and help you understand that there's been some misinformation given to you, and they all, because that's what happens. We did actually, years ago, September, fill the room here with Garland Favorito from Voter GA talking about some of the issues here in Georgia. But it takes some time. You've got to be persistent, and because this whole conspiracy theory sentiment's been spread from the Secretary of State's office, it's sort of filtered down to the state election boards, and they're hesitant to think that they actually do have the power to have just have a vote within the county board that we can use this stopgap measure for paper ballots and optical scanners that we do have or can.
That's really a good comment, that we do have to, work with them as our local board and have to respect them. But look, the house is on fire.
Right.
They
said it's some hysteria being spread on social media.
Well, it's, you know what?
And we're like, no, this is serious.
They can claim that it's hysteria, but as Alex Halderman said, and I think Professor DeMillo would say the same, every computer scientist who has taken the time to think about it recommends paper ballots. And this is not hysteria. No. Computer scientists are boring. They are not. They're not hysteria. I'm just kidding. It's definitely not boring. My point is they're not hysterical.
It's the recommendation of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, it's the recommendation of the Department of Homeland Security, it's the recommendation of the National Security Agency, it's the recommendation of every professional computer scientist that I know and that my colleagues know. We, as a state, are the ox in the U.S. We are so far out from what the mainstream of thinking is in election integrity, that we have to keep this message in front of people.
It's a big stone wall, but we can overcome it. Sir, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. There's one more question from back there.
Given the opacity of our voting system, is there any reason we should expect that we actually have secret ballots?
Ask us again after we've done some discovery. I will tell you that the literature from all the academic studies about the DBO voting system says, and I think, well, you know, we should let Logan answer this because he's done some work on this, but says that the ballots do have unique identifiers and election officials who have access to those records could figure out how people vote. That's for sure. We think that there are even more unique identifiers being added to that in the Georgia's system. We're going to wait till we get to discovery to say just how bad it is, but Logan has actually done some work on this on DBO voting machines, so why don't I let him answer that?
Yeah, sure. So the way these DREs are supposed to record the ballots cast, they record them, or they're supposed to, in a random manner. So they randomize or shuffle them. Well, in reality, when they're recorded to disk, they're recorded in sequential order with timestamps. Yeah. So it's very easy to just sit outside of a polling place and figure out who voted which ballot.
Yeah. I asked that because we had an overvote in an annexation, but about a 200% turnout. When I called the county election person in DeKalb County, she said, no problem. We simply went back and subtracted the votes that weren't supposed to get that question. And she wouldn't explain how she was able to do that.
Was that in 2004 or before?
That was the Chambly annexation, I want to say 2008 maybe.
Oh wow, I want to hear more about that because up until 2004, they were treating all early voters as challenged voters, meaning that they were identifying them in the system, and the idea was, oh, if an early voter votes twice, we'll just pull them out, and they used to do that. We thought they stopped that process, but we do know that for an insider, it is fairly easy to figure out the order that somebody voted, particularly if you think about early voting, where you have these periods of time where there are not many people in the polling place. You know, you may only have 2 or 3 of a ballot style cast during the morning. It gets to be pretty easy to track down who voted how. It's one of the dangers with electronic voting systems.
And when you say insider, I think you're also talking about hackers. Now that, as Professor Haldeman said, we're in the golden age of hacking. You know, So you know, not just someone who knows the system from the inside, but people. It's very easy now to infiltrate.
Right. And you know, we also have to be realistic with the thousands of people who handle this equipment. Not every single one is honest. You know, people will sell this kind of information. And yes, and hackers can get it. But if you did a public records request and said, you know, I want to know how Megan voted, you're not going to get that in a public records request. But the guy on the inside can figure it out, which should never be.
Did you want the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you
so that everybody can hear me. I don't know if my friend Aaron and I consider ourselves scientists, but we're both technology company owners here in the Atlanta area. And we don't know the particulars of the tabulation and reporting system. I know we've been focusing on the voting machines. Are we familiar with the system of reporting and tabulation? Is it secure? If not, what are we doing about it?
I think we should tell about the database of the Jim's database. Yeah, and the system and we saw it in Fulton.
About that. So amongst the data that I was able to acquire, there were Jim's databases that were used that contained the ballot definition files. So an attacker could have trivially just swapped candidates, but made it so their votes basically swapped who you were voting for. And
in the tabulation system, the tabulation programs are in the database.
oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, the tabulation databases actually accumulate the votes and generate the reports. Whenever we went to the English Street, Fulton County annexation, or the sorry guys, I'm wilting, I need some food. But yeah, at English Street, as we were walking around the facility, the GIMS database there, it's really just like it's like a Dell PC, like a workstation, sitting in a rack. And one of the interesting things about that is it's connected over modem to a bunch of other areas. And speaking to one of the workers there, they said they would periodically get spam calls on those lines. Yeah.
Can I tell you something about it too? Oh, you go ahead.
So, can I just say, let's release Logan to his cold food, and he can't be sitting there anymore. If we have a question, we know where to find you.
You got to make allowances for young guys. The tabulation database is based on a non-supported Microsoft product, and if you look back through the history of hacking election systems, the GEMS database was the first component of the system to be hacked. There are papers dating from 2002 that describe in detail how easy it is to hack these databases. So we forget about it because the other parts of the system have become so awful that it's easy to forget about the tabulation databases. But it's a completely open, completely insecure, completely unsupported product.
Tell them about the front lines.
What are we doing about it?
We're buying voting equipment from the companies that provide this as their product.
When you say what are we doing about it, you mean what are we doing?
The tabulation system is not secure.
Right.
But it's part of the system that we buy.
We're trying. We're suing them. We're asking you guys to go shut it down. You know, we're doing.
Is there an alternate tabulation mechanism and reporting that's being offered?
Well, yeah, there are more modern tabulation systems, but the issue is not its age. The issue is the condition in which it's being kept. I mean, it's an old workhorse that will work okay if we audit it.
If we have paper ballots and they actually get counted properly, but in the reporting and tabulation, they're not properly counted and reported, what's all the paper do?
Because we audit it after it's gone through tabulation. So we're auditing the results. So if it goes through a tabulation server that has programming errors or has been hacked, we will know it because we will be doing hand test of auditing the results that come out.
Who's doing the auditing?
Well, Georgia doesn't have an audit law right now, but we are asking the judge to impose that. Okay? But what most states do, and the better practice is that you would have citizen boards, not the officials who are charged with signing off on the elections, but citizen boards doing the audits, and that they must be very transparent. That citizens and candidates and campaigns can come in and watch everything. So you will never have, and I should let Rich speak to this, you're not going to have the unhackable, ever totally safe tabulation server, but what you've got is, if you've got paper on the front end and an audit on the back end, you'll be fine.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question. You keep referring to audits. Are you talking about 100% recounts, or are you talking about statistical samples?
So there's a variety of statistically valid audit techniques, and it's not, I would say there's not a consensus as to the algorithm that you should use, but the idea is that in a close election, you would end up auditing more and more ballots, randomly chosen ballots. If the election was actually decided by 40 points, it will become obvious during this process that the result is right. So in that space, I think there are maybe a half dozen techniques that are currently under consideration. What you should be looking for is the term statistically valid audit. So does the conclusion of the audit support the count that was reported by the tabulator? You know, this isn't the perfect world, and things will always go wrong. Those kinds of auditing capabilities are really crucial to the process. But you can only audit 2 independent pieces of information. So every time you introduce a new piece of technology into the process, you've introduced a new variable, and now it messes up the statistics of the audit, which is why we say just reduce the technology to the absolute bare minimum, audit the total against the paper ballot.
I want to add something to that. And we said that Georgia doesn't have a current audit law. And of course the judge is going to be very hesitant to make law. However, this is she can't make law. She can ask for some controls. But this is, again, what you can do locally. If you go back to Professor DeMillo's USA Today op-ed, and it talks about what people can do at the local level. Virtually every board of elections has got the authority and discretion to do checks, to do recanvass, to do recounts on their own. They can choose to do it. And that's what we should be asking them to do. If you're dissatisfied with what the state election board ultimately decides they have to do, you can ask your election board to do more. The other professor that signed the op-ed with Professor DeMillo in the USA Today, when they talked about what we could do, did a very interesting thing in Heard County in Ohio some years ago. They led an audit, and they let the Democrats choose 2 races to be audited, the Republicans to choose 2 races, and then a nonprofit group chose. So that way, the races that had the most controversy around them, citizens were satisfied. Not necessarily statistically valid, but the controversial races were audited. You can ask your county election board to do that. They've got the authority to do it, even though they're going to act like they don't want to.
Right now it's about 10 minutes to 9, and I just got the nod from Joe, wonderful general manager here at Manuel's, that we can continue. That's up to the speakers. I don't know if you're also hungry and exhausted. Are there more questions from the audience? I know there are. Are we going to continue? You guys okay?
Sure.
Great. And who has a question? Yes, sir.
Marilyn, you mentioned earlier, could you elaborate on the issue of sovereign immunity and how you hope to overcome that in the lawsuit? And the reason that I ask that question is so important because government officials like Secretary Kemp are using this to declare themselves above the law, and they've gotten away with it in Georgia for many, many years. And the attorney generals come in and defend them, or they have taxpayer-funded defenses, as in the case of Secretary Kemp. So that's a very important part of your lawsuit. So could you elaborate on that a little bit, and how you hope to overcome it?
Since that's about a 5-hour answer, I'm going to give you the really short version. In our case, the way we're dealing with Georgia's horrendous sovereign immunity law is we are only suing under claims under the U.S. Constitution. Our suits relate to equal protection rights, right to vote, and we are asking for prospective relief. That is the way you avoid sovereign immunity. So it doesn't work for non-election type things very easily. So anyway, we've had lots of expensive lawyers figuring this out.
And we're so grateful to you again. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Behind this, you have the striped sweater, but behind you. I'll
She
take
was
her
first, so
first.
if you'll let her ask her questions, then I'll ask mine.
Come on up if you want the microphone, or we can try it from back here.
I got a loud voice. Sorry. You go ahead. It's your
Okay. I actually have one question for Marilyn and one question for the computer experts.
Yeah.
The one for Marilyn is, when you vote, like I did absentee for the primary, and then we know that the voter rolls are being sort of altered. If they get your absentee vote ballot, is there a chance that, like, just like on voting day, that they'll go, oh, this is not match up, and we'll just toss this out?
We're at that stage of anything is possible, but I believe that Georgia has a way for you to inquire and find out whether your vote is counted. And find out, and I should know the answer to that, and I don't. But talk to your local election official ahead of time. Don't wait till election day, because they don't want to talk about anything different. But ask them now, what's the procedure for finding out if my absentee vote is counted?
Okay. And then for the computer guys, I don't know, you can do Cloudflare. They're a big software company, and they've taken on what's called the Athena project. And they're offering free election protection software, free, to all local and state governments. Now, obviously, we want paper ballots, and we want hand-marked paper ballots. But would that be something that, you know, if our legislators don't want to, like, give up their profitable machines, would they consider downloading that or giving it to local, state, and governments? I mean, then they can't say they can't afford it because it's free.
So the fact is that no election authority in the country, I believe, has received classified threat briefings. And so it's unlikely that any vendor would have inside knowledge as to exactly what they were protecting against. Remember, maybe my second slide said cybersecurity starts with understanding the threat. And from everything we know about the threat, there's nothing to prevent a malicious party from coming in and modifying your vote, unless it's on paper. Unless it's on paper.
Do you know the Cloudflare company? You know their software? I mean, they're apparently huge, and I saw the guy interviewed on Bloomberg, and he is extremely concerned about our elections and having them be fair. And he's like, look, we put this together. Anyone can have it. You know, it's free. We're really trying
I think unless he has secure compartmented clearance.
I'm not the computer expert.
Yeah, this is intelligence stuff. It's unlikely that he would have any inside information about exactly what he was protecting against.
I was just going to say I'm unfamiliar with the project, but I'll definitely be checking it out tonight. I'm curious.
But of course, in Georgia's current system, there's no way to fix 30,000 machines, and there's just no way to do it. And the system is so vulnerable. Even if you could decontaminate all these, by the next day you would still have the same vulnerabilities. No magic is going to fix it.
Let me give you an example of that. So one of the things that we know the Russians did when they visited 2 counties in Georgia was to hit the employment data sites. So they tried to apply for jobs as election workers. All the software in the world isn't going to help you if you have people on the inside that are working against your best interest.
Has anybody, I'm a partisan Democrat, so I'm not a member of the group, as a disclaimer, but did anybody contact the State League of Women Voters or any of the local county chapters of the League of Women Voters? They are usually pretty good about these kind of issues.
I'm going to have a hard time with this.
Yeah, me too. I want to hear.
Okay, so the League of Women Voters nationally, it is in their platform that they are against the type of voting machines that Georgia has. It is totally a policy of the League of Women Voters that they are against these machines. However, the Georgia League of Women Voters has been proponents of these machines. They supported them since 2002, and as recently as June, they stood up in public at the new voting system meeting and reinforced their support for the current system.
How can you explain that? Is there any history that?
No idea.
Dealing with them
I have no idea, but it cannot be a studied, thoughtful view.
Sorry we didn't invite them here tonight. I mean, maybe they saw the notice, but just decided not to come.
In 2002.
I'm sorry?
The legal women voters received training money in 2002.
Received training money in 2002.
To educate individuals in the DRE. It was a $4.5 million training budget. And from legal women from the Secretary of State's office. Legal women voters was funded to do training.
I see one of our attorneys back there.
Absolutely,
Bruce Brown.
please.
Get to a microphone if you can, Bruce.
No, it's okay. In response to the interest about the League of Women Voters, I did want to mention Common Cause has supported the litigation as an amicus.
We can't hear you.
Common Cause has filed a brief in support of the coalition's position in the federal court case. Very well lawyered. And so the coalition does have the support of them, and also Project Democracy, which is a DC-based voting.
Okay,
I'll try
to repeat what Bruce just said. And Bruce is the guy who worked so hard getting the motion filed last Friday. And 400 pages worth in the matter of a week. It was fabulous. But what he just said is that there was an amicus brief filed by Common Cause, Protect Democracy, which is a fairly new organization you can read about in this area, and the National Defense Election Coalition. I should certainly be able to say that. But anyway, we had a fabulous brief. You should take the time to read it. We hope the State Election Board is taking time to read it because it talks about why every computer scientist and all the federal agencies are saying that these types of systems are unfit for public election. Thanks, Bruce.
It just seems that if those briefs are being ignored, or you're saying they're part of the lawsuit, so they'll eventually become part of the...
Yes, and the judge accepted the brief, and so that will go into the arguments that are made on our side. There just has not been a hearing yet. We haven't got to that stage of the process, but it was a very good thing that she accepted that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, not the League of Women Voters, but certainly, a lot of really,
nationally recognized organizations.
Right. Are there any other questions? Yes?
I'll ask one for the tech guys.
Oh, here.
So, guys, y'all are incredibly valuable, and you should be testifying before the voting system, the State Voting System Commission that is coming out. Have y'all requested that, and have you received a response about that?
No and no.
No, I haven't either.
I think that we should probably wrap up. I just need to very quickly, of course, my thank you list here. Again, Manuel's Tavern, we can't thank you enough for making this possible. Also, our exceptional volunteers, Megan, Ann, Deborah, Ray, Ted. You've been great, and thank you so much. And again, we really want to have everyone's contact information, our little reading table at the front. We have sign-up sheets. This is so that we can reach out to you with more information. And as we move forward, to really take back security for all of our votes in the next few months. It starts here, and this is just the beginning for the grassroots effort. These guys have been on it. It's been a marathon for them, but we're going to start the sprint, and we're going to make it to November with what we need. So You know, please continue to reach out to us with questions or to discuss your ideas. And that's it. Thank you very much, and good night.
Mar?